Hello everyone. I would like to firstly just acknowledge that we're on Menang or Noongar country and pay my respects to elders and their old people as well. Chandel and I are going to talk today a little bit about a couple of plants that her family, her Noongar family, has a lot of knowledge about, and also that in the last few years I've worked closely with Chandel's family and other families in the Noongar community on. So first of all, I guess I just want to point out this is really two-way science, I think, in its pretty truest sense. So this is the really fun stuff when we all get out on country together, and but this isn't just where the two-way kind of aspect comes in. Auntie Lynn, Chandel's mum, and other elders have really been involved in some of the research that I've been doing, really from that very early stage of planning through to kind of doing all this fun stuff out on country, and then really talking through the results very iteratively and working out what's going on, and then have all been co-authors on 3 papers now that we've published or about to on this work that you'll see here today. So Chandel's now going to talk a little bit about one of the... Where am I pointing?
I don't know where you're pointing.
I don't know. Wrong button, that's why. There you go.
Oh, so York.
Yes, there you go. We'll swap places.
Okay. So pretty much York has been identified for this presentation. So it's about that complementary knowledge system that people like Ali and others have worked on projects where we've sort of come in and meshed information, sort of that Western science with the Aboriginal traditional knowledge. So it's always a privilege to be involved in these projects, and I'm pretty much on my learning journey as well, being next in line, so that's pretty much what's happening. For York, that's one of the species we're talking about today. Most people see that coming out as a gourmet plant, really, so used in restaurants and stuff, where we don't see it that way. York, from what I've been taught, was like a survival food. So it swells up. Summertime, you'll see it near water holes or nyamas in granite outcrops. So for us, York swells up. Summertime, we can utilise that to rehydrate, or it's our water source, so we just use it for that. So, yeah, I don't know what else.
The photos here are taken at so that's a nama in the foreground. This is a really well-known nama that the Knapp family know, and then there's York actually growing there right next to it. So that's Auntie Lynn and myself there digging it out right there next to the nama. And this is a really common thing that you see, like it just is there at cultural sites everywhere.
And I think the important thing to talk about is like some of the plants you'll find when they regenerate or get rejuvenated, they're the ones that we go to the most. So you'll have specific spots where Noongars or Aboriginal people go to that harvest their plants. So usually if you go back year to year, the growth will be bigger, and you can see pretty much where people travel based on that. Like if you can dig up one York plant and there's not a lot of bulbs, then you know that's probably not a plant that's used, year by year. So. And
you can still see that plenty of people still eat it today. That's in a coleslaw there. And that's Auntie Carol Pedersen. That's the first time Auntie Carol and Auntie Lynn showed it to me. And this is at a place that Chandel's family would go back regularly to dig it. The work that I did, some of the work was really focused on the genetics of a couple of species. So York is in the genus Platysarchy, and I compared York, so Platysarchy deflexa, with another Platysarchy species, Platysarchy effusa, and Deflexa and effusa grow in very similar habitat. You can see, so the maps there show where I sampled, and you can see that's basically the distribution of the two. So very similar in terms of habitat. They both like sort of Quangan vegetation with quite often blue mallee is emergent in there. I guess the main difference is that Deflexa has a tuber and effusa doesn't. And Deflexa is a really well-known Noongar staple food. And so what I found when I compared the relationships between the different populations of the two plants was that we had basically the populations of Platysarchy deflexa were a lot more closely related, I guess. So we had a lot more shared haplotypes between different populations compared to effusa, and we also had just more common haplotypes, I guess. So we were looking at, so a haplotype is basically a unique sequence of DNA. In this instance, we were looking at the chloroplast DNA. So we had a lot more common haplotypes amongst, so you can see the colours there. The red is a really common one in the Deflexa. There's a blue, two different blues, I think. In the effusa, we had just that one pink common haplotype that was shared across different populations, and otherwise they were all pretty unique. If you think of these haplotype networks down the bottom, sorry, I should be using the pointer if I can get it to work. No. The Deflexa is almost like, I like to think of it like it's like a small country town or something like that, where everyone's related to each other. So basically you've got like haplotypes all really closely related, or they kind of first cousins, and that's about it. Whereas if you look at the effusa on this side, you can see that the relationships are a lot more distant, and in some cases we haven't even found a common ancestor there. So to me, that's really indicative of people moving them across the landscape. There's nothing else that I can think of that would move those across those such big distances. We also did some harvest experiments as well. So this is Arnie Carroll and myself, and we dug up some little 1 by 1 metre plots, because I guess we were really interested. If people are digging these up all the time, then we're really interested to know, well, how do they respond in terms of the disturbance? How do they like that soil disturbance? What happens in the soil as well? So I've just kind of shown you the quick highlights. There was a whole lot of other stuff that we looked at in terms of soil nutrition and stuff. But essentially what we found was that 2 years after harvest, we basically had the same density of stems coming back up again. So the number of plants had recovered after 2 years. That's in that top graph up there. In the bottom, this is basically showing you the mass and the volume of tubers that came out 2 years after. So we dug up some, had a control site that we didn't dig up, then went back 2 years later and dug up both and compared. So essentially what we found after 2 years, that we hadn't got the same volume and mass of tubers back that we had that first time round 2 years before. But talking with Chandel's mum and other elders, they said they would usually probably harvest a site every 4 years. So really we were a bit early, but we're fitting it into a PhD time frame. So we might move on and talk about the other plant that we were going to. So I'll hand you back to Chandel.
Jewellery, so Xamia plants, that's Thomas River. Yep, so far photos, Thomas River. I think it's sort of a very indicative plant for Aboriginal people and their camping or their travel paths. Xamia, I think the first time I sort of experienced it was about 13 years ago. I actually went to Thomas River, and it was the first time I'd been there, but I sort of came into Thomas River and saw Xamia everywhere, and you sort of just go, oh, I'm home. So it's like a comfort thing or a security, knowing that my people or my family were there previous to me. So it's a comforting thing when you see it. Although it's in those populations where it's sort of everywhere, because, you know, when you prepare them, you bury them, and you might forget about them. So then all of a sudden you've got all these Xamias coming up all over the place. So where you see them in abundance is probably likely where they've forgotten them and prepared them. But Mum's always taught us that anything red, apart from quandongs, of course, don't eat. It's poisonous. So you can actually, quandongs you can eat, but the Xamia seeds, you have to wait until it's prepared by the elders so that you can eat it. So women were the ones that prepared it for you. It's such a good source of food, or not a good source of food, but it's a source of food that's there for people when they need them. The bottom one's looking at cheetah cave. So there was a baby found buried in there, and in the burial there's the xanthorrhea leaves, and it's like a macrozamia pit. So there's seeds in there as well. So it means that when you are sending the baby away to Kurunup, what we call our place, our heaven, so they were sending food with the baby on their journey. So.
Yep. So, and Larry mentioned that site this morning as well. That was some work that was done by archaeologist Moya Smith,
Yes.
wasn't it, with elders over at Esperance. So there was, you know, Chandel's just talked about this connection between Xamia and indicating a safe place and a place where people were familiar. So my work, I was really interested at looking at where they grew in relation to campsites over in the Esperance area, and this was made a lot easier by some of those big fires because we could get into some sites. And so over at Esperance, I just need to explain quickly. So basically, west of Esperance, there are big rivers. East of Esperance, there's not. So Noongar people would move through the landscape quite differently over there to the west and to the east. So to the west, people tend to use the waterways. To the east, people tend to navigate by granites, and they're a main source of water as well. So I was really interested at looking where the macrozamias grew in those two different areas, and what I basically found was that to the west they grow mainly around wetlands and along waterways, and to the east they grow mainly around granites. So there's this really nice correlation between where people would move and spend their time and where Xamias actually grow. We also looked at where all the populations are in comparison to where the registered Noongar sites are. And I found that 75% of them grow within 3 kilometres of a registered site. And most, by far, you can see, are less than 1 kilometre away from a registered site. And you have to remember, these are actually registered sites. There's a whole heap of sites that aren't registered either. So they respond really well to fire. You can see down here. Up the top, that's a really interesting cave that we went to with some elders over at Esperance. And there's actually smoke stains on the top of that cave. And macrozamia growing inside them. So it's pretty kind of compelling evidence of what's going on.
Yeah, I suppose it's just really important to note that the science stuff is really important, but that's for Ali, and the traditional stuff for us is really important. So these types of projects are really complementary of each other, and I think that's the really important thing. And we've just used 2 examples, but you can pretty much see that, plant use and plant significance or cultural significance of plants is very important, and we like to share that information. So, yeah. And
thank you to these people who are co-authors on the papers that we've worked on for this, and just for their guidance as well. Yep.